Okay, I think we are good. Okay, so an idea. This one is actually going to be a really, really good one. No, this will be good for everyone. So basically, I was doing a lot of thinking lately, and I'm visually, I don't think there's going to be anything too important on the screen. I'm mostly just going to be doing like copies and stuff and talking, but I might show a few things. So I've been chatting with my brother about this a little bit lately, and basically it's come to my realization that because I talked a lot about repetition, the importance of repetition. If you've watched the other clinics, I talk about, whenever I say, okay, now go do this, or this is a good thing, I always say, like, do it a bunch of fucking times, do it, like, many times. What did I say last time? If you wouldn't benefit from copying something several times, then you wouldn't have fucked up the thing that it corresponds to in the first place. Basically, yeah, copying something is good. Copying something multiple times is even better. And I figured it's worth talking about that in bigger detail. More of the science and mindset, I guess. I don't know if I'd quite say science, but more the mindset behind it, the reasons why, the philosophy, whatever the fuck you want to call it. So it's come to my attention that you can essentially classify all knowledge into two types of knowledge. What I call hot knowledge and cold knowledge. So hot knowledge is knowledge that is very energy consuming to wield. Like it employs the combination of everything everything that goes into the thing you're doing. It's very essential. It deals with how things work at a very essential, very universal, very principle layer. Like, for example, like hot knowledge when it comes to like gesture, for example, if I'm drawing like a gesture, is like understanding that like, oh, directions look good when they like counter other directions, and I kind of like feel the weight distribution, and it's very reactive, it's very situational, it's highly contextual, it's highly interpretive, reactive. It's the combination of everything in your arsenal. It consumes a lot of energy. That's hot knowledge. It's expanding also. It's seeking more info, more instances of itself, more whatever. That's your hot knowledge. It's your general, it's kind of like your G factor, you might say. It's your very fundamental relationship with the knowledge. Now, cold knowledge is, I guess, put simply, it's the opposite. It's knowledge that is highly specific, uses as little. The colder it gets, the less energy is required to use it. The more specific it gets, too, the more it's not expanding, it's actually contracting. It's trying to cut away anything that doesn't have to do with it. And it's also trying to employ as little of yourself as possible to do. So the simplest form of like real like cold knowledge would just be like simple muscle memory. Like, I've drawn this type of line a bunch of times, so it just comes out like this kind of eye shape or whatever. It just comes out, because that's cold. I don't have to think, I don't have to react to anything. I just move my hand just knows to do it. It's just that simple. That's like very, very, cold knowledge. But it goes beyond that. Cold knowledge can stretch into something as fundamental as like, I know that this entire like face drawing looks good because, I've literally seen this face angle and stuff in this style, and I've drawn it, and I've just dealt with the info that goes into it so many times. that it's nothing. It costs like no expenditure to go, that's right, that's wrong, this is what it needs, etc. So basically, here's the part that gets really interesting. You know how I said that hut knowledge is very essential? It deals with things at a more essential layer and stuff, like how things like fundamentally work, like the more core, deep understanding of a thing. That is actually not what makes up your foundation as an artist. Your foundation as an artist actually comes from the cold knowledge. And the reason for that is because that the hot knowledge shit cannot be, as I said in the beginning, it takes lots of energy to employ. You can't get your brain to think on like such like a high perspective and expect it to like do that efficiently, and to do that with consistency and all that shit. That's not what you're looking for. That's not what your fund. I guess I'll just call it fundies. That's not what your fundies are built out of. Your fundamental groundwork as an artist is supposed to come literally from things that take no energy, are highly rehearsed, just highly seen, etc., etc. That's the essence of repetition. That is... Now, I said I wasn't going to show much on the screen as I'm doing this, but I am actually going to show a few things in a minute, and I'll tell you when I'm going to do it. At any rate, I just got to get this introduction out of the way as far as like what these types of knowledge are. So, I'll get some more. So I touched on it a little bit in my other video where I was talking about like hands and stuff and how you want to pose bank and all that stuff, how pose banks are important. Pose banks are a good example of what I'm talking about. They're supposed to be, pose banks are supposed to be your cold knowledge. They're supposed to be a form of cold knowledge. They're poses you don't think about. You've done them so many times. So the thing that I showed you, and the reason this is important to kind of finish selling you on this point, is that it might sound appealing to become some kind of like elder god person who has just this ultimate brain capacity that they see things incredibly essentially, and you're just this reactive god, and you're not, there's something very unappealing and very limiting feeling to people who are not already very advanced at art about hearing like, oh, you're limited by the things you've literally like rehearsed and practiced them specifically like a million times and stuff. You want to have this feeling that like as an artist you're able to just do anything. I remember that was a particularly common kind of meme for a while, even back when I started. I remember there were even people who were pretty good, even being like, oh, I want to just have this like this master key that just lets me do anything perfect at any given time and shit. And obviously that is just not how, forget art, that's not how anything works. You have to work within specifics, and you have to gain this, no matter how much how much hot knowledge you get, no matter how much of the general understanding becomes deep, you're not freed from specific rehearsal, specific subject studies, etc., etc. You just get better. You just get better and faster at gaining that colder knowledge and all that stuff. And if you were thrust into a situation where you just have to do something you're not used to on the fly, it's gonna come out better, obviously. But it's never gonna be your best. Your best is always when you're making full use of cold knowledge. So, to get into why it's your fundy more specifically, It's what you use to define the core anchors of whatever you're gonna draw or do. And I'm sure anyone who is like more, if anyone is listening to this in a more intermediate or near advanced stage or early advanced or anything like that, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, because when you go to draw, I'm sure you know, like, the first thing that hits you when you're looking at the white is, people often talk about how the white is intimidating, the intimidation of the blank canvas, blah, blah, blah. The reason is because there's no anchors when it's all white. So what do? You lay the things down that you can rely on. You lay down the things you know. So that's obviously, like, if, let's say you're a background artist, one of the things that's often going to be is literally like some shit to indicate space and perspective or something. It's like, boom, just by throwing in like a little, let's just say it's a simple 1 point thing. Just by throwing in these lines, it's like we have something hard, we have something familiar, we have a sense of space. And now let's throw in 2 more lines. Oh, now we have more, defined space, It's a thing that lets you make order for free, essentially, because you're so used to what this implies that you just effortlessly created a bunch of order out of what was just pure possibility. This is not pure possibility anymore. We're boxed in. We have a clear ground plane now. We have a clear camera horizon, etc., etc. And if you're drawing characters, it's the same thing. Maybe you're the type that just goes in and starts with a certain feature, like, say, like an eye or something. Or maybe it's a profile or something and you start with like a nose or something. Or maybe you're even the type that starts with like hair or something. Or maybe you're the type that starts with a circle and then does your crosshair thing. Or maybe it's not that, maybe it's a box. Doesn't matter. The point is, you choose the thing, you've done a bunch, it makes sense, it anchors, that's your cold knowledge. So I think that there's this idea that, like, that's either limiting, that's easy to fall into, or there's an idea that this video is probably going to need a part 2, by the way. There's a fear that that's limiting, and there's a fear that it's preventing you from reaching your full potential. But the point is that it is utterly the opposite. You should be seeking to coldify anything that is essential, and anything you start a picture with should always be essential. It should be something so critical to the thing. That's why I said, like, if it's a background, you start with like horizon stuff and like ground plane definition shit, because that's so fundamental and defining of a background in the first place. If it's a character, something like an eye is a huge focal point and a huge anchor of the entire face, and then the face in turn is a huge anchor. I have been kind of showing stuff, by the way, for people who are just listening. I have been kind of showing stuff, but it's not that important. I'm just kind of echoing what I'm saying. The face is the eye is an anchor of the face, which is going to be an anchor of the entire composition. So the point is anything that's essential, anything that's like super fundamental, anything that's very consistent, shows up a lot, those should all get committed to cold knowledge. And repetition is what makes the shit cold. It's repetition. And that's really the trick to the repetition. The repetition isn't just more EXP. It's not just like, level 1 at a face because I drew it like 0 times, and then I drew it 5 times, so I become like level 3, and then I drew it, 100 times, so now I'm level like 8. It's not just more power, it's a fundamental shift in where it exists in knowledge space, which completely changes the way you draw and what opens up other possibilities. Because the more cold knowledge you use too, the faster you are and the less brain space you're working, meaning the more you can start using hot knowledge elsewhere, where it belongs, which is the specific context that you're dealing with. You need to free up the hot knowledge to deal with contextual stuff ASAP. And even beginners, even people who are more early in, they can commit stuff to cold knowledge, even if it feels like you can't. Repetition will coldify things, even if it won't do it as much as, you know, someone who's much better. You are still coldifying things, and you still want to do that, because that's what's going to get you ahead regardless. It might just be, instead of like getting like a whole face coldified, you're just getting parts of it coldified, and that's good. That's going to make a world of difference. So let me talk about now specifically things you're looking for, how you know your shit's getting colder, you know, how you know that your knowledge is coldifying, like what you're looking for. Well, first off, the first thing you're looking for is things are simplifying. You're starting to notice the things you can cut away and the things you can be simpler about and stuff. The fastest, both in your way of thinking and in like what you actually like put down, how you actually put it down. So like, for example, okay, let's say this shoulder, this is a copy, by the way. Let's say this shoulder, okay? So I'm drawing a shoulder. I've drawn a lot of shoulders, obviously, but this is a very specific one, as all shoulders are specific. I have two options here. I can say I'm going to 100% stare at this and try to approach it in the most like ground up, no pre-existing knowledge existing yet way, which is to say I'm going to essentially disregard my cold knowledge for a minute and just look at it fresh, try to look at every single detail carefully and really, really study it really carefully. Go, okay, that's exactly what it did. It's this exact thickness here. It's doing that there, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's lining up exactly with the ear here. Okay, well, then I should have gone farther out. Let me redo that. Okay, it's exactly like that, blah, blah, blah. This is good when you need to increase your fundamental understanding of something because you keep overlooking things. That's when it's good to do this. When it's not good to do this, when you don't need to do this, is when you're getting something functionally right because you're relying on your what you already have known to some extent. So it's like, and what your muscle memory physically is providing for you. So for me, I can look at this and I can just see, I can go to copy it and my brain can just instantly notice something about it. That it's thinner here and then it has this like kind of thicker thing and a little bit of a directional change here. So I noticed, my brain actively noticed three things. Thickness change. A certain thickness change moment, a direction change, actually it was two things, it was just those. I just noticed the thickness change and the direction change. That's it. That's all my brain registered. And then I just simply trusted that from there, I've done enough shoulders that I can functionally do what this copy needs out of me. I just went, okay, it should be fine. It should just work. I shouldn't have to think about it. And basically what's going to happen is after that, you have to ask yourself, you have to then evaluate. How much did I produce the intended result? So there's a couple things here that would be more ideally closer to the actual original, the actual thing I'm copying. But as far as if this was out of my head, would this be fine by my standards? Yes. Okay, so then I can move on. That's how you know, okay, that's all. If I paid attention to two things only, and it worked, the copy worked, just paying attention to those two things, then I know that's all I have to think about. I know that's all that has to enter my head when doing this type of thing. So even from imagination, that would still apply. I'd have to test that. I'd have to be like, okay, let me try drawing a pose real quick. From imagination, you know, like maybe it's a shoulder thing like this. Like a, that's kind of like a ghetto pose, I don't know. Let's just do something like this. It's kind of a silly pose, it's too dramatic. Let's make it more like, let's make it more subdued, yeah. So if I'm making a pose like this, okay, and then I'm gonna go to draw a shoulder, I would test it. I would be like, what was the two things I just thought about there? I just thought about one instance of line thickness change. Not even all the subtle little, I just thought, okay, simply in my head, thickness changes at one point. And then I noted one major directional change. I'm thinking consciously about those two things only. One major thickness change, one major directional change. That's all that's entering my head. From there, it's just going to be pure muscle memory and immediate on-the-fly, like, reaction, so to speak, like physical, subconscious reaction that's going to make me, you know, draw in the rest. So I'd look at this and I go, am I happy with this result using just what I just used? Yes, I am happy with it. Okay, so that tells me, so what was consciously in my head, what was actually running through my thoughts consciously, that was me harnessing stuff that is not cold enough to not think about at all. That's me harnessing something that I'm putting hotter energy into, and I'm trying to think about more like as a equipped principle. I'm thinking of that single instance of a directional change as I'm thinking of the entire concept of directional changes and what they typically, the result they typically produce as I'm thinking about it and stuff. Anytime you're thinking consciously of something in art, that's what you're inherently trying to do. And that's why it's always hot knowledge. That's why it's always energy consuming, highly energy consuming. Whatever goes right without having to do that at any given point means that it's being backed by cold knowledge. So in the next video, what I'm going to do is show lots and lots of examples of good ways to practice and lots of ways to know that you're turning certain bits of hot knowledge into cold, and which knowledges, which specific knowledges to turn, you know, which specific pieces of knowledge you should be targeting for this process. That's what I'll talk about in the next one. So this one was kind of abstract. So it might have sounded like kind of a, I don't know, kind of a mouthful to track everything. But the next one, with all the tangible examples, should honestly, if there's any questions, it should probably clear it up. If it doesn't clear up everything, I can just make yet another video just clearing shit up. So At any rate, if there's nothing else to take away, repeating practice is good. Practice, draw the same face multiple times, both from imagination and as a copy.